Paris, the Versailles Palace. In 1623, Louis XIII, King of France, built a hunting lodge on a hill in a favorite hunting ground, 12 miles or 19 kilometers west of Paris. The site, near a village named Versailles, was a wooded wetland that Louis XIII's court scorned as being generally unworthy of a king. From 1631 to 1634, architect Philibert Le Roy replaced the lodge with a chateau. When Louis XIII died, Anne became Louis XIV's regent, and the chateau was abandoned for the next decade. She moved the court back to Paris, but after the Fronde, a civil war from revolts against royal authority from 1648 to 1653 occurred, and Louis XIV was determined to rule alone. He moved the court back to Saint-Germain-en-Laye and ordered the expansion of his father's chateau at Versailles into a palace. Louis XIV did not take any special interest in Versailles until 1661, and on August 17th in 1661, Louis XIV was at the palatial residence of Nicolas Fouquet and his Superintendent of Finances, the Château de Vaux-le-Vicomte. Louis XIV was impressed by the chateau and its gardens, which were the product of Louis Le Vau, the court architect, André Le Nôtre, the royal gardener, and Charles Le Brun, a royal painter. After Foucault was imprisoned, though, Louis XIV recruited them to build Versailles. Louis XIV replaced Foucault with Jean-Baptiste Colbert, who personally directed and inspected the painting and planning and construction of Versailles. The victory over Spain in the War of Devolution over, Louis XIV turned his attention to making a full-scale royal residence from the chateau at Versailles. The chateau had a new Italianate facade overlooking the gardens. Louis Le Vau died and was succeeded by his assistant, architect François d'Herbe. During the 1670s, work at the palace focused on its interiors as the palace was nearing completion. Following the end of the Franco-Dutch War with the French victory in 1678, Louis XIV appointed Jules Hardouin-Mansart to be the first architect. Mansart added the Hall of Mirrors, renovated the courtyard facade, and expanded d'Herbe's pavilions to create the ministers' wings. This happened in 1678 to 79. Louis XV and Louis XVI largely left Versailles as they inherited it, focusing instead on the palace's interiors. In the 1730s, Louis XV added the Salon de Hercule, a ballroom in the north wing, and the expansion of the king's private apartment. In 1748, Louis XV began construction of a palace theater, the Royal Opera of Versailles, but construction was interrupted in the 1740s by the War of the Austrian Succession and in 1756 by the 7 Years' War. These wars emptied the treasury, and in 1771, Louis XV had the Northern Ministers' wing rebuilt in the neoclassical style by André-Jacques Gabriel, his court architect. In 1789, the French Revolution occurred. The king and queen learned of the storming of the Bastille on Paris on the 14th of July in 1789 while they were at the palace and remained isolated there as the revolution in Paris spread. A crowd of several thousand men and women protesting at the high price and scarcity of bread marched from the markets of Paris to Versailles. They took weapons from the city armory and besieged the palace. The French Revolution swept the royal family and government out of Versailles forever. The Palace of Versailles was key to Louis XIV's politics as an expression and concentration of French art and culture, and for the centralization of royal power. From 1678, Louis XIV made Versailles the seat of government, and he expanded the palace so as to fit the court within it. By 1687, Versailles was the de facto capital of France, and Louis XIV succeeded in attracting the nobility to Versailles to pursue prestige and royal patronage. The historic galleries and their decor, the aim of Louis-Philippe Versailles' project was to restore and perpetuate the splendor of the palace under Louis XIV. Every space in the historic galleries was redecorated in a style from that time in order to transport the visitors straight back into history. Teams of painters and decorators created decorative compositions, panels, and friezes, covered the arabesques and medallions, trumpe de lait shields and trophies of arms, together with historical paintings and portraits. The restoration of the king's chambers, Louis Philippe carefully preserved the apartment of Louis XIV, based around the King's Chamber at the heart of the Museum of History. He carried out the first historical refurbishment by recreating the furniture of his room, which is so symbolic of the final years of Louis XIV's life. A large Grand Duchess bed commissioned from Jacob de Semuller, as well as a set of armchairs decorated with periodic embroidery separated from the public by a balustrade, evoked the system of etiquette. Here we see the coronation of Napoleon, and if you recall from my video on the Louvre Top 10, the coronation of Napoleon was one of the most famous things in the Louvre. It was painted by Jacques-Louis David and completed in 1807, depicting the coronation of Napoleon at Notre Dame de Paris, where Napoleon crowned himself and his wife and emperor and empress of the French in the presence of his family, the Pope, and dignitaries. The oil painting spans 33 feet or 10 meters wide and 20 feet or 6 meters tall, and David was commissioned by American entrepreneurs to paint a full-size replica in 1808. He began the work that year, painting it from memory, and finished it in 1822. The replica, though, was returned to France in 1947 to its original place in the Palace of Versailles. Here we see the painting sitting in the Palace of Versailles. Next, we see the Grand Apartment. The Grand Apartment was completed in 1670, was decorated between 1671 and 1680. Initially an antechamber, the room became a bedroom in 1678. The Duke of Madrid was proclaimed King of Spain on November 16, 1700. Weeks before leaving for Madrid, the apartment, an apartment for the royal family games, evokes Louis' patronage to the sciences and would usually be used in the evenings. The ceiling painting depicts Louis XIV and in general the development of arts and sciences. Next here is the King's Bedroom, which was created by Louis XIV in 1701 and was where he lived until his death on September 1st, 1715. In this room, the royal rising and bedtime ceremonies took place, and above the bed are the painting of Julius Caesar's Denarius, painted by Valentin de Boulogne. Here we see the Royal Chapel. This is a two-story Palatine chapel, so I'm on the second floor, and you can just see the first floor here, but you're getting a view of the second floor. The chapel was designed on the model of the Holy Chapel in Paris. It was built between 1687 to 1710. It was started by architect Jules Hardouin-Massat and ended by Robert Descotes. The tribute in front was reserved for the king and royal family. Here we see the Gallery of Battles. Soon after taking the throne in July 1830, King Louis Philippe I decided to restore the Palace of Versailles, transforming it into a museum of French history known as the Historic Galleries of Versailles. He called on architect Frédéric Nepveu to convert the apartments on the upper floors of the south wing into a vast gallery chronicling the main military battles that shaped the history of France. Drawing inspiration from the Grand Gallery of the Louvre Museum designed by Charles Percier and Pierre Fontaine, under the imperial regime, the Gallery of Battles depicts famous French battles ranging from Tolbiac in 496 to Wagram in 1809. The battles are depicted in 33 gigantic paintings, and additionally 80 busts, sculptures, pay homage and honor to the heroic officers who were killed in combat over the centuries fighting in French wars. The works began in 1833 and were completed shortly before the inauguration of the museum dedicated to all the glories of France on the 10th of June, 1837. Versailles is vast. It's mostly an art museum now and has lots of paintings and sculptures. There is a couple of halls full of sculptures and busts of famous people. Here I took a picture of René Descartes and Michel L'Hôpital. This shows the lineage of the Bourbon kings and the Bonaparte kings. So the starting with Henri IV and the Marie de Medicis, whose children were whose son was Louis XIII, who we heard about, who created the history of and started the Palace of Versailles, and his offspring Louis XIV and Louis XV, and you see down on to Louis XVI. And then we move on to the Bonapartes, Charles Marie Bonaparte and Maria Ramolino, who gave birth to a number of children, including Napoleon, who made the a lot of the Palace of Versailles and a lot of the things in Paris famous. Here we see the gardens of Versailles as they have existed since the reign of Louis XIV. They are the work of André Le Nôtre. Le Nôtre's gardens were preceded by a simple garden laid out in the 1630s by landscape architects Jacques Boisseau and Jacques Demers. Now the gardens are absolutely enormous and huge. You see, like, people are almost little pencil dots here, and I had to take this picture. I obviously didn't take, but I wanted to show how huge and vast and beautiful they are when seen from an aerial photo. So this is a picture that I took. So the Louis XIV purchased land and cleared the woodland expansively, and the resulting gardens were a collaboration between Le Nôtre, Le Brun, Colbert, and Louis XIV. They were marked by rigid order, discipline, and open space, with axial paths, flower beds, hedges, ponds, and lakes as motifs. They became the epitome of French formal garden style and have been very influential and widely imitated or reproduced. So thank you for watching this video. I hope this gives you a little bit more sense of what Versailles is. Versailles has hundreds of rooms that are just essentially rooms full of art, and I just gave you some of the highlights here, which gives you a sense of the palace. It's absolutely vast and very beautiful. Give yourself about a day to visit the locations and the gardens. So check out some of my 3 other Paris videos. I have Paris, a city tour, the Louvre, a top 10, and the going to the top of the Arc de Triomphe. So thank you for watching and have a great day.